Why are so many passengers going overboard from cruise ships? And why does nobody seem to notice until it's too late? Cruise ships track almost everything that you do. Your spending, your cabin access, your dining reservations, your movements around the ship, with thousands of cameras. And yet, when a person goes overboard, it's almost certain that nobody, including the cruise line, will know what has happened to the person that is missing. And in recent years, including 2025, those disappearances have happened again and again and again. When cruise lines talk about safety, they usually mean compliance. Compliance with international design rules, compliance with training standards, compliance with operating procedures. Modern cruise ships must meet those requirements. If they don't, they won't comply with international laws and regulations, and they will not get the necessary certifications that they need to function. Rail heights must comply with regulations. Onboard life-saving equipment must exceed minimum quantities and standards. Crew members are drilled regularly in emergency response and must all carry STCW safety training certificates, which include personal survival techniques, fire prevention and firefighting, first aid, and proficiency in security awareness. Whether it's your cabin steward, your waiter at dinner, your favourite barman, all crew will have been trained and certified in these areas by law. From an engineering perspective, cruise ships are among the most heavily regulated passenger environments in the world. But safety on paper is not the same as safety in practice, because many of the risks passengers face at sea do not come from structural failure. They come from human behaviour. And the cruise industry still relies heavily on one fragile assumption: that someone will notice when a person falls overboard. Cruise ships are carefully designed commercial environments. Food, entertainment, excursions, retail, and alcohol are all engineered to maximise onboard spending. Alcohol, in particular, is aggressively marketed. Unlimited drinks packages are promoted as adding value to your cruise. Promotions encourage volume rather than moderation. It almost implies that you need to drink to have a good cruise. Sail away cocktails, poolside cocktails, free bubbles at sail away, late night bars, parties. Take Carnival Cruise Line, for example. In 2024, they made just over $25 billion. On average, up to 40% of total revenue is generated on board, where drinks are one of the main purchases. That is a staggering $10 billion. Do cruise lines really want to encourage cruisers to drink less when they're generating so much money for them? I think not. What is striking about overboard incidents is not how often alcohol is confirmed to play a part in onboard incidents like man overboards. It's how rarely the subject is examined at all. Press statements are usually very brief, details are limited, context is minimised. That silence does not mean alcohol is always involved, of course it doesn't, but it does mean that the industry has little incentive to interrogate how its own marketing and commercial model may increase the risk of such events. In October 2025, a passenger was reported missing from Norwegian Jewel while the ship was crossing the Atlantic from the Azores to Miami. This was open ocean. The passenger was reported missing, authorities were notified, a search and rescue operation was launched involving multiple assets, and the search was unsuccessful. There was no confirmed moment when the passenger was seen entering the water. The alarm was raised after their absence was noticed by a fellow passenger, but by that point, the ship had already travelled tens of miles. The bridge was forced to estimate when the event might have happened and where. And at sea, that uncertainty is devastating. Trying to find a body in hundreds of square miles of sea area becomes near enough impossible, even in daylight. At night, virtually impossible. In November 2025, a 73-year-old passenger went overboard from Disney Wonder while sailing in the Tasman Sea between Australia and New Zealand. A multi-hour search was conducted using thermal imaging, but the passenger was never found. Thermal imaging is a powerful tool, but it is only effective when the search area is limited and you know roughly where the passenger is. Once time passes, the sea does what it always does. It spreads everything out and everything becomes so much smaller and more difficult to spot. Later that same month, a 76-year-old British passenger was reported missing from Marella Explorer 2 off the coast of Tenerife. According to reports, the passenger went overboard during breakfast near the aft, and from all accounts, looked like an intentional act. Spanish Maritime Rescue Services launched a large air and sea search. The passenger was sadly never seen again. In August 2025, a 79-year-old passenger went overboard from Norwegian Star near Greenland. In this case, the body was recovered, but sadly the passenger did not survive. This is one of the very few recoveries recorded in 2025. The response occurred closer to the moment of entry. That is the reason the body was recovered. Also in August, a crew member went overboard from Sun Princess while the ship was en route to Istanbul. Emergency procedures were activated, but the crew member was never seen again. Different ships, different cruise lines, different waters. The same structural weakness. The system responds after someone is missing, not at the moment they enter the water. There's nothing there to prevent this from keep happening. To understand why detection matters, you have to understand what happens to the human body when it enters the water. The moment a person enters the water, cold shock can begin. Breathing becomes rapid and involuntary, heart rate spikes, coordination degrades. In water around 20 degrees Celsius, many people assume survival time is generous. It isn't. Muscle strength fades progressively, swimming efficiency plummets, and fatigue sets in quickly. In colder water, particularly below 10 degrees Celsius, this process accelerates dramatically, where hypothermia can set in within as little as 10 minutes. But we also need to consider the officers and crew on board and explain why detection is so important to them. Ships are trained in specific man overboard maneuvers. When a man overboard is witnessed and reported immediately, the officer of the watch does not pause to investigate or confirm. They are trained to act in the moment. The response is structured, rehearsed, and sequential. First, the ship is turned towards the side the person fell from. This is critical. It immediately brings the casualty onto the lee side of the vessel, reducing the risk of them being pulled under the hull and through the propellers. One of the first physical actions taken is to release one of the life buoys. It gives the person in the water something to hold on to, and just as importantly, it creates a visible reference point for the bridge. At the same time, the bridge marks the position electronically. This reference point is of huge value. The wind and the current will undoubtedly move the person. The ship will also move, but the point of entry is now fixed in place, and the officers and the captain can estimate the direction and location the current and wind have taken the person in the water. Lookouts will be immediately posted on the bridge wings, equipped with binoculars. One captain I worked for said that on his ship, he would make a passenger address, calling as many passengers out onto the open decks as possible. Doesn't matter whether they're passengers or crew, for all you know, a passenger on the promenade may have visual. The officer of the watch will ask for a lookout to jump on the wheel and switch from autopilot to hand steering. Autopilot is precise at maintaining a heading or a course, but it is not responsive in the way an emergency turn requires. This is where the Williamson turn comes in. The manoeuvre begins with a hard turn towards the side of the man overboard. The bow will start to swing round in the direction of the casualty, but the stern will do the opposite. And once the ship's heading has changed by roughly 60 degrees, the wheel is put hard over in the opposite direction. The ship continues turning until it settles onto the opposite heading, retracing its original track. If it is executed correctly and immediately, the ship will pass very close to the original point of entry. While this is happening, the ship's whistle sounds 3 prolonged blasts, the internationally recognised signal for code Oscar. The captain and engine room is informed, if they haven't been already. The emergency rescue boat crew is mustered and prepared for launch. Radio communications are established between the bridge and the rescue boat. Everything is logged. Every decision, every alteration of course, every communication. But there is a hard truth here. Every step you have just heard depends on one thing: knowing where the person went into the water. If that information is missing, the checklist and this whole procedure collapses. You cannot release a lifebuoy on the correct side if you don't know the side. You cannot assign a lookout to point at a casualty they cannot see. You cannot plot a fixed position if the time and location are unknown. And you cannot execute a meaningful Williamson turn if you're guessing where to return to. A person does not stay where they entered. Even a modest current can move a person hundreds of meters within minutes. After an hour, the potential search area can span tens of square miles. After several hours, it can become hundreds. Technology exists that can detect a person going overboard in real time. Camera-based systems, infrared detection, radar-assisted monitoring. These systems can alert the bridge within seconds. They are not experimental. They are proven items of safety equipment, and yet they are not mandatory in the industry. I'd like to know why. Cruise lines operate under international maritime regulations. Those regulations set minimum standards for virtually everything you see: bridge equipment, gangways, watertight doors, fire doors, sprinklers. At the moment, detection systems are not required. There is no universal mandate to retrofit existing ships. Call me cynical, but it seems that these detection methods haven't been introduced by cruise lines because they don't generate any money. But I really don't understand why the IMO are not giving this the attention it needs. Surely it's worth a try. None of this sounds very radical to me. It is simply not being prioritised. When a man overboard is seen, the system works. What keeps failing is everything that comes before it. Because a system that depends on someone noticing at exactly the right moment is not a safety system. It's a gamble. And at sea, gambles cost lives.